Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, I'm joined by Malcom Craig to talk about a book that is very close to his heart, The Robot Brains. I've been chatting to Malcom on and off for a while now, and he made this recommendation. He's a part-time games designer and full-time lecturer in American history with a specific interest in the Cold War period, and is currently conducting research into the history of nuclear war in role-playing games. So obviously, we have to talk a bit about that too. It also just happens that he was behind one of my favourite role-playing games of the last 20 years, Hot War, and that has recently got a second edition. More on that as we chat. Full disclosure, Sidney J. Bounds was an author I'd never heard of, but it turns out he does have a wee connection to Moorcock, other than being a busy writer operating across a similar period of time. This is a book from 1956, so you could be excused for expecting some dated language, and if there are any references or terminology that might be offensive, then I apologise in advance. But on the whole, it's actually fairly progressive. So seal the hatch on your bunker and risk some of your precious water supply to drag one more brew out of that oft-used tea bag, and join Malcom and me as we take a look at The Robot Brains. By gum, we will talk about this book. Because, we'll get to that in a second, where you recommended this book. But we're back in Derry Toms, and I'm very, very happy to welcome Malcom Craig, academic, senior lecturer in American history, Cold War specialist, RPG writer, designer, researcher. Well, there's a few things. We could take them one at a time if you like. But welcome, Malcom, to Derry Toms.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Lovely to finally join you. I've enjoyed your many episodes. Your recent ones on the Oswald Bastable books. That was my first ever Moorcock books that I ever read. Was the Bastable ones. So it was a delight to hear people talking about them.
Yeah, because I think it was arguably my first. It was that or the Ace Pocket book edition of Stormbringer, and it was Robert's first. But it's surprising how many people have dropped me a line to say that was my first Moorcock, and I haven't read it for 30 years. Really enjoyed the conversation, and that's probably going to end up being a three-parter.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And also, I mean, it was listening to your episode on the ice schooner as well. That I think it was the one I read next. After that, and I think like about Conrad Arflane. We'll get back to that one. But oof. Anyway, sorry, I'm sidetracking here.
No, it's cool. This is what we talk about because, of course, you know full well one of the questions we often ask people is how did you get into Moorcock and genre fiction in the first place? You've just touched on Warlord of the Air and the Ice Schooner as being your firsts, but how else did you tumble down this rabbit hole?
Oh, so it was my dad. So my dad had in the loft in our house, he had a big collection of paperback science fiction from the 40s, 50s and 60s, and some into the 1970s. So as a kid, probably way before I should have been reading this stuff, I started reading, I mean, all like Heinlein, Clarke, Asimov, but also stuff like that those guys now, I'm like, not so sure, but authors that I still really like Algis Budrys, and stuff like that I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so that was my education in kind of like genre fiction. That's what I think. That's why I became a bit of a science fiction nerd. That and watching, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and BBC Two at 6 o'clock in the evening ran a series of old B movies. I mean, not just B movies. This Island Earth. It came from outer space. Terror from 20,000 Fathoms and all these kind of, I'm messing up the names and everything, and those and my dad's books, that was the stuff that really got me into it. I still go back to a lot of those. Still love that stuff.
I remember that series, that BBC Two 6 o'clock series of films. I can't remember if there was a Tuesday or a Thursday, but
I think it was a Tuesday.
Yeah, it stopped me from going to Cubs because I was already a Cub Scout. But I refused to go while this season of science fiction movies was on BBC Two. And our Kayla kept ringing my mum and dad and saying, where's Andrew? Why don't you come? And they say, he's poorly or something like that. But it's because I wanted to watch This Island Earth or what's the one with Gordon Rennie and the robot?
God, just my mind is just blank. One of the most famous science fiction, 1951.
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
The Earth Stood Still. Good. God.
Yeah.
Middle age does not come alone, I'll tell you
it's
that.
It's a nightmare, isn't it? So I'm full of lurgy and snot and rubbish at the moment as well, and it's breaking my brain. So I'm probably going to have many malfunctions this evening. I'm attempting to drink it away with Malibu and Coke.
Oh,
because
why not?
I was going to dig out, but I thought for the book that we're going to talk about, I've still got some Advocaat in the fridge and it hasn't solidified yet. But I've got no lemonade left, so I was going to have Advocaat and tonic, and I thought that might be quite a suitable drink to do the robot brains with. But then I thought, no, that's probably fucking awful. So I had a bit of Malibu left, so I'm on the Malibu and Coke. I need the caffeine, I think.
Why not? Right. Indeed.
What the hell were we talking about?
How do we get into science fiction?
Yeah, that series of films.
Yeah.
And then once that season ended, I went back to Cubs and all was forgiven. Yeah, but yeah, there was no way I was going. Yeah, so you've got your in the 80s, and of course one of your specialist interests, as well as being an academic, one of your specialist interests is Cold War studies and nuclear proliferation, and so in the 80s, if you're a child of our age, that's probably going to saturate your brain as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was the interesting thing, kind of like growing up where I did. We were about kind of a couple of miles up the hill from Grangemouth Oil Refinery, which I think was about the biggest oil refinery in certainly in Britain, maybe in Europe. And even as kids, you knew that was a target in the event of a nuclear war. And then, kind of like age 10, my parents let me watch Threads when it was first screened. And like I was 10 years old, I had like nightmares for weeks after that because I didn't really understand. What was going on there, but it was just these terrifying images. So like, nicey domestic drama, kitchen sink, kind of like, oh my god, there's a nuclear attack. And so there was all that kind of stuff. And in many ways, I think my kind of academic career in being interested in the nuclear age and nuclear war and everything, I always tell myself it's in some way an attempt to try and understand what terrified me as a kid.
Yeah,
but I don't see, because of the fallibility of memory. I don't know if that's true. I could just be making a story up to sound more interesting. It could just be nonsense,
Yeah. So you'll have been into all of the Twilight 2000 and all that business. Because, of course, you were a gamer and you've gone on to write games as well, and we'll talk about a little bit of that. But you just recently did a paper on Twilight 2000, didn't you?
It's weird how things come around. The first proper role-playing game I ever played after like doing fighting fantasy stuff and all that thing was Twilight 2000, post-1984, post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war, one with your American soldiers in Poland and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of the circularity of kind of life in that I now study or research the history of role-playing games in a relationship with Cold War and nuclear fear. Yeah, and just recently published a paper in the Journal of American Studies on Twilight 2000. I think it's the first ever academic paper on Twilight 2000. So it's really interesting to be doing that. It's this kind of full circle thing, that this kind of, something I get into as a kid is now a big part of my kind of, not just, social life, but my professional life as well. And it's fascinating. I mean, the great thing is having kind of conversations with, gamers, other people who played these games in period or are just interested in it. And I've done a big oral history project as part of all of this. So talking to people about their reminiscences of whether it's the United States, Canada, UK, wherever, growing up in this period and playing these games and everything. It's fascinating to explore this stuff.
I became a little bit obsessed with all that stuff as well. I think we're probably around about the same age, I think, from what you're saying. My mum and dad wouldn't let me stay up and watch Threads, but our English teacher put it on. So the entire class watched it at school, and we're subsequently traumatised.
It's the film that traumatised a generation. It really did.
Yeah, absolutely. But the whole, like, moving to role-playing games and everything like that, I was reading... because I had Twilight 2000, we played it quite a bit. It wasn't my first role-playing game, like a lot of kids. I started on Dungeons & Dragons, and then we did a bit of Call of Cthulhu, and we did a bit of MERP, and then once I realised that Twilight 2000 existed, it was like, right, this is my jam, despite the first edition having that fucking horrible system. But that was absolutely my jam. And so I ended up getting the History of the Third World War, Parts 1 and 2 by, was it Hackett? By John Hackett. Yes. He
holds up a prop. Yes. General Sir John Hackett.
God,
can't remember. No, I haven't got it round here. I've got it somewhere. I've got Team Yankee down here somewhere.
Oh
some other bits
yeah,
and
the one
pieces.
kind of like that's set in the war that Hackett as overall organizer of the book kind of describes it.
Yeah, so I remember getting them, and when we first had a conversation, I think probably last year or maybe even the year before, about doing something on the podcast, I realised that I haven't had them for years, and God knows what had happened to them. So I ended up going on eBay and getting them again. So I've got my my John Hackett History of the Third World War books again, but I've still not managed to figure out the time to actually dive into them. But yeah, I mean, Twilight 2000, Threads, all this stuff. It was just such a massive obsession.
Yeah.
For so many of us as kids. And the weird thing is now, being in our 50s, it's still there. You know, it's still there, just like that. Because I grew up in Hull, and we were aware that, you know, Hull was pretty badly bombed in World War II. We were aware that Hull would be prime target because of the docks. So, living in Hull, we didn't stand a cat in hell's chance if the balloon went up.
So, related to that, this evening, just before this, I was looking at the 1972 government report from the UK on predicted nuclear targets for the UK in event of a Third World War. I think Hull they predicted 3-1 megaton airbursts on Hull. That's what Hull was going to get. So, yeah.
So that would pretty much clear out the East Riding of Yorkshire, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I always think that the Threads was a slightly optimistic take on what things might actually turn out to be like. There's a great document from 1955 that I always go back to called the Strath Report, and it was like commissioned by the British government in 1954 after the first, Castle Bravo, this big American thermonuclear test that goes wrong. It's 3 times the size it should be, and fallout suddenly comes into the public lexicon. So the British government commissioned William Strath and his committee to write this report about, like, what's Britain going to be like in the event of a war using these new huge thermonuclear weapons. And it so alarmed the government, it wasn't declassified until 2003. And it is incredibly grim reading, because Strath essentially goes, in the event that we are hit by 10 megaton bombs, that's it. Britain as a functioning society, finished, done, gone, over. And he had these recommendations for this complete reorganisation of British society to cope with the threat of nuclear war. But it was so, and it's still very stark and terrifying, and it shows how few of these things could actually, that's it.
Yeah.
Society is gone, done. Yeah, terrifying, but fascinating at the same time.
Exactly, and it makes great imagination fodder as well, doesn't it? The other thing that tipped us off was, I can't remember whether it was Arena or what program it was. It was definitely a Beeb program, because it was Jeremy Paxman who did the narration on it and who introduced it. There was footage from a nuclear war exercise in the bunker at Warne, just outside of Hull, at the village of Warne.
Like, yeah.
And it's available on YouTube, and it's chilling but hilarious.
I think I might have the government response to that. I think it might have been Panorama. You and nuclear war or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to dig in my memory, but yeah, I've got so many documents from the government responses to all of these programs and what they thought about them. But yes, no, I recall the program you're talking about.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on our My Experiences of the Third World War episode, because I dug it out on YouTube and I watched it with Phil, and the comptroller is this like council accountant or something, like this head of finance or something like that, and he's in charge of the bunker during this operation. And they ask him if he, at one point, I can't even remember how it comes up in conversation, but it's about if he has the power to order executions. And he says, well, as it happens, yes, I do. And you could tell he's got a massive fucking boner as he's saying it. It's absolutely incredible. But yeah, it's still out there. I'll dig the link out.
I suddenly get this power. But some of the ideas that came out of that, I mean, what fascinates me is kind of like what nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war, provokes people to think.
Yeah.
Not just imaginatively in terms of creatives doing stuff, but so there's some brilliant British government civil defence planning documents from the early 70s, and there's one letter in one of the collections from a civil servant who is thinking about how do we deal with the population just running about being crazed with fear and law breaking down, and one of their suggestions is, well, why don't we go to the secure mental hospitals and we take all the psychopaths and the most dangerous murderers, and we officially make them vigilantes to help keep the population in control. Now, this is a memo from one civil. It never goes anywhere because anyone sane that looks at it and goes, never talk about this again.
Yeah.
But it's and how in a similar time period they're discussing how. Like, if there's a nuclear attack in London, people are going to flood out of London into the surrounding countryside. And these refugees from London are referred to in the official documentation as zombies.
Really?
Which is a really it now. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting because that's almost pre the kind of like the way, zombies have entered the kind of cultural lexicon in our kind of like modern language. I mean, you had Hammer horror films like Plague of the Zombies and all these kind of things. But so, yeah, it's interesting the way kind of like people think about other people in these situations as just zombies, or let's use psychopaths to control the population.
Being a civil servant in my day job, I can imagine some of those meetings that have took place where people like blue sky thought of things that they could do, and some of the senior civil servants I've worked with, and when I just think about some of the harebrained things that they've said over the years, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that they came up with that idea. Not one bit.
I can entirely imagine.
You've taken a lot of this knowledge and you've poured it into game writing as well, haven't you?
I have, yes. So Cold City and Hot War were two games that I wrote in 2006 and 2008. And then for about a decade, I kind of abandoned role-playing games for various reasons. I was doing my PhD at the time and all that, and I was very busy and various other things. But I've been kind of friends have kind of like drawn me back into it. It's been really nice, actually. It's been lovely. So we've just finished off the second editions of Cold City and Hot War, one set in Berlin in 1950, the other one set in a post-apocalyptic London in 1963. And so they're going to be coming out printed, hopefully, a couple of months' time, fingers crossed. Both of those have kind of like, it's been nice to go back to stuff that I wrote when I was, in air quotes, an amateur. And now that I am also, in air quotes, a professional when it comes to the study of history and all that kind of thing, and reinterpret them and rewrite them, and kind of like you do stuff that I perhaps wouldn't have been able to do previously. And both of them I like kind of like embedding in a very light touch way the actual history, so people can. Games aren't textbooks. We've all kind of like sat down with role playing games, and you have to read 50 pages of the history of Krognar before you even get to kind of like do anything interesting with the game. I think no, games aren't history books, but if you can kind of like use them to help people kind of like evolve their understanding of the history, is really interesting. So Hot War it kind of makes Threads look like a walk in the park. It's Hot War in many ways is my reaction to all the stuff I don't like about Twilight 2000.
Yeah, funnily enough, you must have posted them to me back in the day, because I got the first editions of Cold City and Hot War from the website of the publisher. So I'm guessing that was probably you in your house.
Yep, me and my friend Paul Bourne, who I've worked with for about 30 years. He does all the art and graphic design.
Yeah.
And I think Paul's a genius. So yes, one of us will have put them in an envelope and sent them to you. Yeah, it's all very artisanal.
Yeah, when I backed the new Kickstarter, I dug out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, the artwork looks fucking brilliant, by the way.
It does.
Well, that was an automatic back for me. Even though I keep trying to talk myself out of backing Kickstarters, because I've got so many Kickstarter games that arrive 2 years overdue and never get read, or they're still in the cellophane. But Hot War, I had Cold City, but Hot War was the one that I read and I thought, oh yeah, I like this. This is fantastic. The tone of it, the bleakness of it, right up my street. Yeah.
It's been nice to get like people kind of hearing that again from people. It's so kind of, it's a real privilege to hear that from people that it's a game that really engaged them, the setting and the way it worked and everything. You'll be pleased to know the PDF will probably be dropping into your inbox before the end of this month.
Oh, very good.
For Hot War, we're just crossing the I's and dotting the T's at the moment.
Is there a backer kit where people can pre-order that, or was it Kickstarter only?
It was Kickstarter, but we're going to be kind of opening up to pre-orders unless pre-orders are open. No, pre-orders are open now for Cold City. You can pre-order Cold City and then get the PDF straight away, and we'll be doing the same for Hot War as soon as it's out. It's just so we can get people the PDF as soon as they make a pre-order for it.
Yeah, well, I'll get those links off you.
Oh, great, thank you.
I'll stick them in the show notes. But it's funny, that point you make about role-playing games not being textbooks. One of the things I absolutely loved about Twilight 2000 Second Edition, and it also tied into me reading the John Hackett books, was I loved all of those pages and pages and pages full of speculative projections of what would happen, because it was all part of games designer workshops. They used to wargame everything, didn't they?
Yes, yeah,
and put together these massive projections of what was going to happen, and that spun off into Traveller 2300 even, which was repackaged as 2300 AD. I loved all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
but with the exception of the Survivor's Guide to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, yes.
Which is one of the worst role-playing game supplements I think I've ever laid eyes on.
So I'm on a research sabbatical at the moment because I'm writing a book on games and the Cold War and nuclear fear with a focus on role-playing games. And someone, maybe it was you recently on Blue Sky mentioned, certainly in the past couple of months, mentioned the Survivor's Guide to the UK.
Yeah.
And more than one person has mentioned that. And I've kind of and I've still to actually dig into, I need to sit down because I need to devote a certain amount of time to that particular supplement and, what it says. I mean, I'm kind of leaning over to put, this is an audio kind of thing. Nobody can see me, but I've got piles of Twilight 2000 supplements sitting next to me right here. They're at my feet. There's all these kind of games, including, well, hang on. Nobody can see this, but I'm now holding up the box for first edition Twilight 2000. And including also possibly the greatest role-playing game of the 1980s, The Price of Freedom.
Oh, you know what? I always wanted to read that. I never got hold of a copy. But to me, seeing the adverts for it in the pages of White Dwarf, I was always oh yeah, that looks really fucking cheesy and brilliant and amazing.
The Price of Freedom is 1995. Oh. Which, as it said in the adverts, Price of Freedom is one of those games where it caused such a controversy in the pages of White Dwarf at the time. Yeah. You might recall the letters pages being on fire with this stuff. And of course, it's a satire. Greg Costigan is the arch satirist of role-playing games. But it was so, at points, it is so straight-faced. It's so straight down the line that, for some people, they were like, is this satire or is this just like Red Dawn, the role-playing game? And it is Red Dawn, the role-playing game. But it's good. Actually, if you can track down, I think you can find it in PDF and everything. If you can track it down, there's actually some very clever bits of design in it. There's some good bits within the game and some very subtle things in it, and I'm probably misremembering, but in combat, Americans can never panic. Only, and this is important, only commies and their quizzling lapdogs can panic. Right? And that is actually genius. And the Soviets and their quizzling lapdogs get taken down by one bullet. But if you're an American resistance fighter, you can just walk. It's like Chuck Norris kind of thing, because that's what it's meant to be like. But there's some actually really Costigan makes some really pointed comments in there that you read it and go, yeah, he's clearly taking the piss.
Yeah.
It's good. It's fun to read and kind of because I never saw it in period. Nobody did. I don't knew anyone who had it. So it's one of those games that is such a. It's such a crystallization of a particular moment in the 1980s within US politics and culture, within the Cold War and everything. It's fascinating to go back and read this stuff. I can't believe I'm actually getting to write a book about this kind of thing. It's like,
you know what? That's such an exciting thing, and I can't wait to read it. But
I can't wait to write the damn thing.
the idea. See, I never really knew that The Price of Freedom had its tongue at least partially in its cheek, because all I ever really saw was the cover and the furore around it, which just made me hungry to read it. But my idea of the people who were writing these games in America in the 80s were always... Let's have a look. I don't know if I've got a copy of it kicking around here, but it was always like the Kevin Dockery types who did the Edge of the Sword Volume 1.
Oh, yeah.
The
man was
compendium of modern firearms.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, there was a kind of a whole bunch of, So Price of Freedom was like the non-serious. No, it was serious, but it was satirical. But there was a whole bunch of other games. It's a shame this isn't video because I've got a whole bunch of props here. So you had a whole bunch of games that weren't actually serious about America being invaded. Year of the Phoenix. Now, the reason you know that America has been taken over by the Soviet Union is that America is now spelt with a K. That's always the classic sign that the Soviets have taken over. So you have Year of the Phoenix in a similar vein, and from the same company, FGU, who produced Aftermath. You have Freedom Fighters, which is
I've never seen either of those.
So Freedom Fighters
completely passed me by.
And then you might remember this, also causing controversy in the pages of White Dwarf, Delta Force, America Strikes Back. Now, these are all part of the... I'm actually writing a paper on the macho men with Uzis genre of games because there's so many games covers of macho men with Uzis in them in this particular. So I need to write something about that. But this was it was a thing because it was in the cinema. You had Red Dawn, you had Invasion USA. There was Arnold Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris. All this thing. So no wonder game designers went, I'm sure gamers would buy games where you get to be a macho man with an Uzi wandering around gunning down the Soviets. Yes.
We only watched Invasion USA again like a week or two ago. It's fucking hilarious. It's such a funny film. Oh, it's wonderful.
I've used the poster for that in lectures because it has Chuck Norris, bare chested, double denim, bandana, 2 Uzis. I mean, it basically goes, welcome to Reagan's America. It's so kind of its time.
Yeah, I mean, the only disappointing thing about that film is Chuck Norris, he didn't really kick anybody. It's all about. I think he might kick someone in the end. I think maybe it was the guy with the scarred face who plays the baddie.
It's so long since I've watched Invasion USA.
You see, this is the problem with my brain not working because of all the laggy that's in my brain. I should know that guy's name straight away. I think he might kick him at the end before he shoots him out of a window with a bazooka or a law or something.
That ties with my memories of what happened there.
Yeah. You know what? We could do a whole 2-hour episode talking about all these things. And at some point, perhaps we should. But we've been going 25 minutes. We've not even touched on the book that you recommended.
Oh, God.
We should talk about. Now then, explain your recommendation.
So we're talking about the robot brains here, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So, Sidney J. Bounds. How to describe the oeuvre of Sidney J. Bounds? Pulp, pot boiler, science fiction... nonsense. And the robot brains. So I've always had a soft spot for the robot brains because the first time I encountered it was in late primary school. So I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, probably at the same time I saw Threads. In each classroom, you had a little kind of like mobile cupboard kind of thing that opened up, and it was a library. They did books in it. And that's where I kind of got like Susan Cooper's Darkest Vising books and Oversea Under Stone. I mean, brilliant. Those still stand the test of time. And like, tucked away in a corner was this little old, like 50s, 60s style paperback that was really ragged. It was sellotaped together, but the cover was amazing because in big red letters at the front it just said "The Robot Brains," and there was some weird machine in the background. And there, I've still got my copy upstairs. I should go and get it. And then a guy running away, and I was like, I've got to read this. And in retrospect, I think, as a 9 or 10-year-old child, there's a lot of stuff in there that perhaps a 9 or 10-year-old child maybe should not be reading about. But that book, and I forgot about it for so long. And then in a second-hand bookshop, in the 50p, please just take these books because no one will ever buy them. They are rubbish. There was a copy, I was leafing through it, and this must have been in Edinburgh, and there was a copy of The Robot Brains, and I was like, I have got to buy that. I would have paid a tenner for it. I don't care. So it's a book that since I was a child. It's one of those daft pulp SF. The stuff that you talk about all the time on this podcast. This is your wheelhouse. It's so redolent of a specific time for me.
This was so up my street.
I thought it might. I knew. I was like, as soon as I mentioned it to you, I knew it would be.
Yeah. Now, I'd never heard of Sidney J. Bounds before this, but you recommended it. I managed to get a copy for about a tenner, signed by Sidney J. Bounds as well, which is
the Holy Grail.
Yeah, which I found out when it arrived, which is quite cool. But I'd never heard of him. So more than 40 novels, hundreds and hundreds of short stories under various pseudonyms and aliases, right up to his death at the age of 86 in 2006. He was still writing short stories. A couple of his novels were even released posthumously, by the looks of it, if you look at his Wikipedia bibliography.
Yeah.
Proper jobbing writer, working on pretty much anything for any market or magazine that paid. In the late 40s, after demobbing as an electrician in the RAF, he was writing for Girls' Star Stories.
Yes.
Yeah, just one of those classic writers. But then in the 50s, he starts writing for Nebula, the old New Worlds under Ted Carnell, Authentic SF, and Visions of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then in the 50s, he starts knocking out these sci-fi novels, one of which is The Robot Brains. So I looked him up, and just before his death, he was interviewed by a bloke called Andrew Darlington for a website called The Zone. And he says this about the period. He says, "We shuffled the manuscripts around between them until someone took one. When that ended, that was more or less the end of science fiction in this country. But by then I was doing other things. I came across a line of spicy magazines put out by Benson Herbert, whom I'd met earlier. In fact, he used to write for the old Wonder Stories way back in Gernsback's day. By then, I was doing ghost and horror books, and I also had a line on children's books and magazines too. I started writing juveniles after sending an early SF story to Ted Carnell. He returned it, commenting that it was fine but too juvenile, and I took his remarks seriously. So I sent the story to Junior Digest, a periodical published from Dublin. The editor liked the idea but said it was too long, so I rewrote the story as a 6-part serial, each part 1,000 words long. They bought it, then another serial, and another. Then I caught on that I could write and sell juveniles. So I wrote more. Tarzan Adventures. I wrote a series of Cliff North stories, about 14 of them, for Mike Moorcock when he was the editor of Tarzan Adventures. So I managed to keep going. And then he says a lot about writing full time, and at one point he managed to do 30,000 words over a weekend. But that was very rare. There was a guy called Maurice Huigi, and he was writing a 50,000 word crime novel every week. And he never felt that he could match that. So he was one of those
really prolific,
prolific jobbing writers. He never made the switch from the Ted Carnell era of New Worlds to the 60s Moorcock era, because I think he was a little bit too traditional by the looks of things. Certainly by the reading of The Robot Brains. It's not exactly progressive or transgressive SF, is it?
No.
And by the 70s, he's doing his horror stories for the horror anthology boom in things like the Pan and Armada and Fontana books of ghost stories and horror stories. And he just carried on right up until his death. And this interview took place the year before he died. And the last thing he says to Darlington, he says, "I go to the vintage book fair at Victoria. I see Philly P. High there sometimes because he comes up from Canterbury. He's still writing at 90. Ted Tubb used to go, E.C. Tubb, until he had a heart thing. Also Phil Harbottle, Harry Harrison and Jim Cawthorne. But not only have the second-hand bookshops gone, I only know of one in Wimbledon, but now the cheap remainder shops are going too. Ray Bradbury's book burning starts any time now."
Ooh.
And that's his last words in an interview to someone before he dies. Bless him. I wonder what he would have made of the recent announcement that mass market paperbacks will soon be a thing of the past.
I'd say probably nothing good. I mean, he's a fascinating. He's one of those fascinating. I mean, he wrote westerns really kind of traditional, like Zane Grey style westerns and everything. He's one of the I mean, as you say, a jobbing author. One of those authors who was just like, right, my job is to write stories, and I will turn my hand to any genre that really comes across my desk, kind of thing. And it's dude does that kind of author with that kind of level of, I was about to say prolificity. That's not even a word. Does that kind of old school art even exist anymore? I mean, is AI going to kill that kind of thing?
I don't think it does, because it doesn't pay, does it? These guys were,
exactly.
These days, to describe something as artisanal means it's ponzified and made from, whole food ingredients, or it's like a really fancy schmancy loaf of bread. But artisanal in the 50s and 60s meant that you did something for a job, and you earned money at doing it. So these guys were artisans in the way that bricklayers were artisans, or carpenters, or any of this stuff. It was absolutely a trade, and it paid. It just doesn't pay anymore, does it? You might get people who write this much stuff, but they put it out on their own websites, because nobody's going to pay them to do it.
And all those magazines that you mentioned, those are long gone, and they were such a a hothouse for, I mean, not just for your jobbing authors, but a hothouse for like the real talents that emerged from that had their first publications in all those, magazines. That all is, sadly gone. I mean, I've got loads of copies of, the paperback volumes that John Carnell, edited together, and all of this various volumes of like collections of New Worlds stuff and everything. So yeah, and it's God, I hate to have kind of like rose-tinted nostalgia for anything, especially rose-tinted nostalgia for a period when I wasn't even alive.
Yeah,
which is kind of weird. But I think those books kind of like, there's something about that period of 50s and 60s genre fiction.
Yeah,
which is, I think, lost now.
I can't help but have that nostalgia because it entirely, actually getting my hands on these books entirely informed my worldview and how I view media and how I view entertainment. So, I'm sitting now in a room where I'm absolutely surrounded by books, probably 60% of which were published before I was born.
Yeah.
And the Robot Brains is another great example. Now that mass market paperbacks are going to be a thing of the past, the idea that, second-hand bookshops, we need them more than ever,
Yes.
And somewhere like, and there are a few good ones in London, I know that, but somewhere like the Old Pier Bookshop in Morecambe or Carnforth Bookshop, any of these places, they're treasure troves for me.
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. And the fact that nobody can make money doing it anymore, because another one of the things he says after he's talking about doing 30,000 words in a weekend, he said very few people even then were making real money out of it. Most of them were scratting around, he said. He said scratting to get £1 per 1,000 words. So this is the 50s, obviously a pound is worth a few bob more than it is now. But he says, the only one I knew in those days was Arthur Clarke. He got tough with them. He employed an agent who said he'd not accept anything less than £10 per 1,000 words. So Arthur C. Clarke was in the rarefied air of writing short stories and getting £10 per 1,000 words for his short stories in the 50s and 60s. So if people were scratting around for 10% of what Arthur C. Clarke was getting paid, some people were making money out of it. But when we've talked about people like Guy and Smith and Graham Masterton and all those, they started their writing readers' letters for Penthouse. Not even Penthouse, for the shit British versions of Penthouse, like Escort and God knows what else, and Men Only and Mayfair, So, but it paid, I guess. But anyway, the Robot Brains. The Robot Brains. So, what does it say on the back? Brains without soul. Giant blonde creatures. They were as curvaceous as the bodies of their dwarf men were shriveled. Which is an incredible standfast for a book. Captain Christian was the only human who had ever laid eyes on them, and now he wished he hadn't. They were beauty without heart, cruel, cold, and he was their prisoner. Well, now, I'm not. I think that is slightly misleading in terms of this book. I think that could give the 40-year-old guy who wants a little bit of excitement and titillation from his sci-fi, that's going to give him a false idea, because he's the prisoner of 9-foot-tall women for about 2 pages.
Yes.
Out of 190 odd. But, there are 9-foot-tall women in it.
There are, in an underground jungle, as far as I recall. It's such a... I would love to know the thought process behind this, because it is such a mashing together of just so many different ideas and stuff. I mean, it's that, that's the nature of like Pulp Fiction. Let's just bang the stuff out and all that kind of thing. But traveling circus. This one scientist goes, I think the traveling circus is behind the killings of scientists, but not just killings, decapitations of scientists.
It is absolutely baffling.
That
Sydney thought this stacks up. This stacks up, this, because chapter 1, we get a murder mystery established.
Yes.
A guy called Dr. Fox, is advising a police inspector around the details of a brutal crime, or a series of strange decapitations that he says tend to occur when the circus is in town. The police inspector is a bit dismissive, so Dr. Fox determines that he must get the help of Christian. We'll come to Christian. He's the hero of the story, basically. Meanwhile, at the fair, circus ringmaster guy Burkholder is treating the paying public to the incredible Brains with capital B's, who are 3 dwarf-sized fellas in silver suits with huge craniums. And if any member of the audience asks them a question that they can't answer, they will get a crisp £5 note. But Burkholder is absolutely confident.
This is 1956.
Yeah.
And £5 was worth something back then.
Absolutely. £5 was 50,000 words by Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah. So these dwarfs as fellas in silver suits, they answer any question, so he never has to give his fiver up. The next portion is a mysterious figure called the Old Man dispatches a burly fella called Miller to check out the fair because they're aware of what Dr. Fox is into and what he's saying. They feel the decapitations may be the result of a new weapon or something because the bodies don't bleed. It's completely cauterized and they want a piece of that technology. And then we get introduced to Christian, the guy that Fox wants involved. So let's see what Christian is all about. Let's have a look. Get my glasses on. Have I got my reading glasses? I sure hope so. Oh well, I'll have to manage. Right, here we go. The Thames lapped gently against the hull of the motor yacht Sea Mist. She was a trim craft, her paint spotless and her brasswork highly polished. Everything about her, from the coiled ropes to immaculately veiled sails, pointed to the fact of her owner's pride and seamanship. This stretch of the river, where the Sea Mist lay moored, was quiet and peaceful. Beyond the deserted towpath, trees and fallow land showed in a clear grey light. Mallards, glossy green and purplish, made widening ripples in the water with their swift darting movements. Below decks, in the long cabin that was at once sleeping quarters, galley and workshop, Captain Christian, ex-Royal Navy, sat reading the day's papers and smoking a thin black cheroot. He was a tall, rangy man, smartly dressed in navy slacks and yachtsman's jacket. His blonde Van Dyke beard and sea-blue eyes hinted at a Nordic ancestry. Indeed, a Hollywood director had once wanted to cast him as a Viking raider. Christian, however, prepared to take his adventure neat rather than canned. He sat now in a swivel chair, bony features concentrated. Behind him, rows of books on a variety of technical subjects. As he turned the pages of the Daily Post, carefully comparing similar reports in other papers, the light from a brass hound lantern shone on startling headlines. Girl scientist victim of decapitator. Lovely Margaret Greenways, research biologist, is the newest victim of the maniac killer. Her body was discovered early this morning, decapitated, as have been all the victims of this madman. Miss Greenways had been working on a secret method to improve the quality of potatoes by selective breeding. As usual, there was no sign of the head, the fifth murder of this kind. When are the police going to make an arrest? The public have a right to... ... This is our hero, Christian, and he's been asked, he gets a telegram, and he's been asked to go and meet Dr. Fox down the pub. So, we get into Chapter 2. There is so much going on in Chapter 2. It is absolutely incredible. It's a scintillating chapter of exposition and action because he catches up with Fox down the pub and hears Fox's pitch as to what's going on. Fox reckons the dwarves with massive brains are using the circus to move around the country and murder scientists with an energy weapon, and they're probably aliens that want to stop us spreading humanity to the stars.
Logical conclusion. Conclusion.
This is like 7 pages in. And Dr. Fox... Turns out Dr. Fox not actually on the money. We'll find out later on. But it's not far off. The circus is distributing 3 dwarfs around the country so they can murder a scientist wherever the circus stops. Captain Christian, over a couple of pints of bitter and a luxurious cheroot or two, decides that he's going to look into this by getting a job at the circus. Which is absolutely incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It is so incredible. And while that's happening, some ambitious Khan in the Far East is planning world domination and is gathering European scientists to help him amass an armada of rockets with radioactive payloads. And as if that's not enough, in Reading, academic sociologist Gilbert Thurston is hanging out with his cat after putting the finishing touches to his paper that'll revolutionise human society when a strange presence melts his head and burns his work. Bloody hell. It's all going off. That's a lot for the first 2 chapters.
It is. There is a lot going on in this book, and I love the idea of kind of like Thurston sitting down and going, "Well, I think time for a well-earned whiskey. This is going to revolutionise human society." Yeah. He says to the cat, and the cat doesn't care. He just wants to know where the tuna's coming from, and it just goes. One of the reasons I love books like this is because there's no pissing about. They just kind of go pale. I mean, there is a degree of pissing about in kind of like, the descriptions of Christian and like I mean, as a kid, I didn't know what a cheroot was, so I just thought not the faintest idea. I thought it was a plant of some kind. He's smoking a cheroot. Root is what you get in a plant. I don't know. So yeah, and it's just the grab bag of ideas in all of this is just. And but it also, I mean, it draws on so many kind of like prevalent concerns at the time. You get like it's kind of weirdly kind of like a time this time capsule of this kind of you have the in the 60s you can get these ideas of the brain drain.
Yeah.
And all of these kind of things. So there's all these kind of brain drain ideas. There's the this idea and the kind of like the revolutionary force of the social sciences that are kind of really emerging at this time, that they can be a force for like change and all that kind of thing. Some science fiction authors are kind of like, yes, the social sciences will save us all. Other science fiction authors like Robert Heinlein are like, no, social scientists are terrible, hang them. That was in Starship Troopers. I think it's basically it's the social scientists that cause all these problems. Ben killed them, and now everything's fine. And nuclear warfare and fear of the atom and all of these kind of things. It's fascinating, even in something as I hate to say you hate to diminish someone's work by calling it trivial because it's not. It's meaningful, but something that is a relative footnote in literary history.
Yeah, I think the odd thing about Bounds that makes this quite charming. I mean, you've got the charming elements like the fact that Fox and Christian have that 3-page long conversation about the dwarfs and what's going on in the pub over 2 pints of strong bitter and a couple of fags. Yeah. And the description of the wood-panelled pub and the sad-looking aspidistra in the green vase on the table that they're sat at. And the barmaid listens to him talking about the dwarfs at the circus, and she leans over the bar and says, "Oh yeah, I went to see those dwarfs with my sister. Oh, I didn't like them. They were a bit weird." It's fantastic. But really, if you're debating the potential invasion of the Earth, it should be over a couple of pints of best bitter in the pub. That's how things should go down.
Yes.
And that there's a certain charm to Bounds' writing, because this guy in Reading isn't the only sociologist who gets bumped off. There's another sociologist who gets bumped off as well. So he's a guy who is writing in the 1950s, and he's of this idea that actually the development of society through social sciences will have a hugely positive impact on the way that we live our lives. One of the scientists, Napoleon Wells, is a black guy who is written quite sympathetically by a white British author in the 1950s. Holy shit, some of the books we've read on this podcast cannot claim that.
For sure.
So Bounds, I'm behind him on all this. On the other hand, I'm not entirely convinced that alien dwarf brainiacs shacking up in a circus to use it as a vehicle to travel the land to do their nefarious deeds quite stacks up. Especially when we discover later on that they're time-travelling dwarfs who can go anywhere at any time because of a black... What the fuck has the circus got to do with anything?
I mean, I think they'd have been better served by a mobile library of some kind. I think that would have been better. No, I mean, the circuit. It's all those kind of logical leaps and just holes and everything. But one of the things I love about using this as an example. So I'm a big fan of like Georges Simenon's Maigret. Books. And Simenon is an incredibly economical writer. He's brilliant. He can write one sentence and you instantly know in a short sentence what this person is like, what this place is like. I mean, he has got this fantastic economy. There's nothing wasted in anything that he writes. And as opposed to kind of like writing of the style of Bounds, where there's this luxuriation in unnecessary detail about the mallards, about the cheroot, about and again, as you say, that is actually quite charming because it's it's bringing the ordinary into this fantastical story that Christian's sitting there surrounded by mallards and smoking, and then suddenly Dr. Fox comes to him and goes, "Oh, by the way, Jack Mekon style guys going around in a circus are death raying scientists." Oh, very good. Another pint, Doctor. It's of
course, another thing that we've got to remember about this book as well is it's set in 1966, but it's written in 1956. So this is a much earlier book than we're generally used to reading on this podcast. So this idea of the charming pub conversations and the circus and all this business, this is being written where, the first Quatermass film is barely out. So, yeah, it's a different Britain. It's a different Britain we're thinking about in terms of this book. But, yeah, we'll just have to see how it pans out, won't we?
But I think
we'll have to see how it pans out.
That is I think that's a really important kind of point of historical context with this, because Britain in 56 is in crisis. What is Britain's place in the world? You've got Suez, which is kind of the death knell of empire. Britain's last hurrah, trying to be a big boy on the world stage and all that kind of thing. And they're usurped in the Middle East by the United States. Decolonization is happening. It's only 4 years later you get Macmillan's Wind of Change speech and all of these kind of things. So it's a real period of change and crisis for. I mean, of course, you could very easily argue that post 1945 for Britain is basically a perma crisis.
Yeah,
just lurching from one economic disaster to another and all that kind of thing. But that's beyond the scope of this discussion. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, Anthony Eden's the Prime Minister at this point, isn't he, in 1956? Short-lived British Prime Minister who didn't really cope with anything particularly well. So
one of the interesting things about Eden in this period is, so in 53, he had a botched bile duct operation. This is a point. And the guy was he was on painkillers.
Yeah,
and he was taking a lot of painkillers, and he was also suffering severely from stress. He was having blackouts in Parliament.
Yeah,
so a doctor had put him not just on the painkillers but on uppers. It must have Benzedrine. So one of the interesting things about during the Suez Crisis is there's a very good chance that Eden is not in his right mind. The guy's in a lot of pain. He's on a lot of medication, and the same with Eisenhower, is just recovering from his second heart attack. The American Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, has just been diagnosed with a cancer that's going to kill him. So there's a lot. One thing I love when teaching stuff to students is you got to know the people.
Yeah.
Involved. But Eden, I think it's right. Eden was a terrible Prime Minister.
And in this book, the Prime Minister has a nervous breakdown because he can't cope. And it seems really, really random that he has a one-page interjection of how poorly the Prime Minister copes with the entire scenario. Mm-hmm. And then he's never mentioned again for about another 40 pages. And the next time the Prime Minister's mentioned, it's the Deputy Prime Minister. Because the Prime Minister has gone to a convalescent home.
His home, yeah. That is him basing it in reality. That's Eden and the actual situation that Eden found himself in.
And this all just makes Sydney Bounds just all the more fascinating to me.
Yeah.
All of these things, all of these little onion layers as you unpeel them. Whilst you're juggling all of this with the absolutely crackers events of this book.
And it just gets more crackers as you go on.
Oh, yeah. It certainly does.
This is only the kind of the top layer of the onion. There's much more to come.
Well, it turns out getting a job at the circus is really fucking easy. Because he turns up in some dungarees, and the first person to talk to him is the owner, Burkholder, and the first thing Burkholder says is, "Do you want a job?" So he shacks up with another guy, and it's Miller. It's Miller who was sent there to investigate it by the old man, and he got a job 2 days ago as well. Mm-hmm. So they've both managed to figure out that in order to investigate the circus and the brains, they both need to get a job at the circus. And they both do get a job at the circus, very successfully. But Miller keeps disappearing at night. But Christian makes friends with a true dwarf lady called Jo, who's not keen on the brains because she says they're not true dwarfs. They're just a bit weird, and I don't like them. But there's this wonderful, wonderful bit with Jo. Jo said suddenly, "A penny for your thoughts." "I'm wondering," Christian said, "where the brains came from before they joined the fair." Her eyes fixed on his face, troubled. "You're very interested in them." "Just curious." He tried to keep his voice casual. Jo looked away past the line of telegraph poles to the hills in the distance. "I don't know," she said. "They only joined us a short time ago. They appeared out of nowhere, showed their acts to Burkholder, and he signed them on at once. I'd advise you to forget about them. They're not nice people." "Madame Rosita?" Christian drew on his cheroot, waiting. "Yes," he prompted. "Madame Rosita?" The lorry jolted over a humpbacked bridge, and a silvery stream showed momentarily before vanishing behind the trees. Madame Rosita was with us for a long time. Everyone liked her. She was a plump, middle-aged woman with a fortune-telling booth. Of course, a lot of what she gave her clients was the usual spiel, but she really was a medium. At times, she seemed actually to know what was going to happen before it occurred. She was curious about the brains, too. Foretelling the future was her special line, and one day she suggested to Victor, he's their leader, I think, the one with the small flat ears, that she read his palm for him. This amused all the brains immensely. Well, Victor agreed, and Madame Rosita sat down with a crystal ball on a black cloth in front of her. There were a number of us watching, including Burkholder. She stared into the ball for some minutes, saying nothing. Finally, she covered it over and looked hard at Victor. He asked her what she had seen, but she only shook her head. Jo paused in her story, staring across the panorama of fields and hedges. She was silent so long that Christian said gently, "Is that all?" "No. Next, Madame Rosita brought out her cards. She asked Victor to deal them, and he did, but again she would not say what they told her. Finally, she took his hand in hers and studied the lines of his palm. Her face was quite white now, and her eyes had a haunted look. Burkholder spoke sharply to her, but she hurried off without a word. Within an hour she'd packed her things and left the fair. We haven't heard from her since. She saw something that scared her. That's why I suggest you should leave the brains alone." Christian threw down the butt of his cheroot. Rows of houses showed beyond the tailboard of the lorry. They were approaching a town. It's a queer story," he murmured, his brows knitted in thought. What was it Madame Rosita had discovered? The more he thought about it, the more important it seemed. He decided to set Fox to trace the fortune teller immediately. So the dwarfs, the brains, appeared out of nowhere, sold their act to the circus master, and got the gig of travelling around the country. Are they telling the circus master which towns to go to, or is there just randomly a scientist working on a particularly advanced sociological formula or an incredible new breed of potato wherever they go, just by happenstance? It just doesn't stack up. It's mysterious, but it doesn't stack up.
They were everywhere in the 1950s. Everywhere you go. But the one thing I love about this is just So on one hand, you have actually, for the time, quite positive representations of people with disabilities in this, which is again like his representation of the black scientist.
Another big tick for Sydney.
Sydney, you're thinking, oh, maybe Sydney Bounds wasn't such a bad guy, and also how you get the sense of like what on earth what is going on here. I'm not even sure what the story is, and it always struck me that I don't think Sydney Bounds knew what the story was. No. This book reads to me as someone just writing it as they go along. I don't profess to have inner knowledge of Sydney Bounds' kind of like writing process, but I love the idea of them just going to random towns and there being some like a research station there just by happenstance. Yeah. Because it's like all those Hammer movies that are set somewhere like what's the one that was going to be a Quatermass film, but Nigel Neal said no. And so they made it something. X the Unknown. Yeah. And that's just nuclear research station, some random town in Scotland. Yeah. Kind of thing. You just have these random little places like Winnerden Flats and Quatermass and all these kind of things. I just love the kind of like the travel log element of it, of just meandering around the country, assassinating scientists.
The way the story progresses, it could easily be a Tygon film from the 1960s, starring Patrick Allen, like The Body Stealers or something like that. It's got the pub scene, it's got the landlady, it's got
Night of the Big Heat or something like that, yeah.
It could equally be a John Pertwee Doctor Who story.
Yes.
Like maniac brain dwarfs from the future up to no good at a circus. That is very John Pertwee unit.
I hadn't thought about that before, but yes, this is it is absolutely, and you're right, that it's a Pertwee era.
Yeah.
Not
only that, but after episode 1 and 2, halfway through the overall story, you get the most bonkers switch of focus to what might as well be an alien world. It isn't, we'll get to that.
Yes.
But what might as well be a completely alien world, a completely whole new set of circumstances, a whole new set of threats, a strange scientific explanation for it all, and a Deus Ex Machina in the form of a couple of people.
Yeah,
it is so John Pertwee Doctor Who.
It is. I absolutely. You're right. I had not thought about that before, but that is exactly what it's like.
This could have been turned into a good John Pertwee 4 or even 6-parter.
It could, something like Inferno or the Green Death or something. Green Death, was that a Pertwee one?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Inferno was always my favourite. One of those.
Oh yeah, I love
the
Inferno.
Alternate reality, British fascist state, all that kind of thing.
I love Inferno for a number of reasons, but one of the probably more obscure ones is one of the episodes has got a commentary from the guy who played Benton, Sergeant Benton.
Oh yeah.
Just one of the episodes on the DVD, and it is priceless. John Levine
John Levine, that's the guy.
Quite an odd fella. I think it's episode 4 or 5.
Right.
He does the commentary. Yeah, quite an odd fella. Yeah, but absolutely priceless. But yeah, I love that. With the exception of the bad, hairy face makeup. That's absolutely terrific. But Nicholas Courtney with the scar, you know, it's Star Trek Mirror Universe kind of shenanigans, isn't it? Yeah, it's great. And also, I hate to say it, but evil Liz Shaw, super hot.
Evil Liz Shaw.
Super hot. Well, anyway, because this book doesn't hang around, Christian soon finds out who Miller really is, and Miller knows who he is because Miller is military intelligence. So the old man is the head of military intelligence. Mm-hmm. And the circus arrived at Newton Chase just in time for a rocket scientist called Lawrence to get murderized. So Captain Miller and co are taking a great interest in Fox's theory now. Elsewhere, the Khan is enjoying the presentations from his scientist, paving over a dancing girl, and Fox has tracked down the fortune teller Madame Rosita to her flat in Balham, and she's got a lot of intel for him. And I'll just read a little bit of this. I'm glad to keep the readings to a minimum, I think, because we've been going an hour and we're barely 40 pages into this book. So I'm glad to condense things a little bit. So anyway, I won't read it. It says, she saw strange worlds, a world you couldn't imagine, totally different from Earth, almost impossible to describe. There had been, I should say, a long and terrible war. The countryside was desolate, dark and cold, with a weird, luminous look to it. All the ground was cracked and broken into vast areas of desert. There were some ruins, and the architecture was very odd indeed. Once I looked over a frozen sea, silent and lifeless, with not even a bird in sight. Even the sun appeared different, red and dim and low down on the horizon. Then I saw fire trails in the sky, and insect things striding about. I can't describe them better. Alien things the size of dogs, and scuttling about on 6 legs. Horrible they were! So, yeah, she got this vision of where the dwarfs were from, and it sounds like it's very dying Earth, isn't it? It's very dying Earth. It's either a dying planet or it's a dying Earth or something. But Fox was right. They are some kind of space brain blokes and she also mentions very tall, beautiful women. They're immortal dwarfs with massive space brains with very tall girlfriends. And military intelligence are trying to process all this, plus the threat from the Khan. They even have some intel that suggests the brains might have been involved with the Khan because of some sightings, but also that the Khan surrounded himself with ex-Hitler scientists. So the brains could be the Khan's people, or they could be extraterrestrials, or both. But it's all going off in Newton Chase because after interfering in a bit of bullying of Little Joe by the brains, so the brains are bullies as well as anything else, because Little Joe decided, being clever, said, who committed the murders? And for the first time, they don't answer the question. So she should have done that when the show was on and should have got a $5 rather than being bullied. But Christian interferes and then gets framed for the murder of Miller. Yep, Miller is dead. Poor Miller. We barely knew thee. Yeah. But now Christian is wanted for murder. The circus has moved on to Cambridge, so we get a couple of pages where he's tunning around on a bicycle. Yeah. He nicks a bicycle and he's tunning around the countryside on a bicycle, and he spends 3 pages tunning around, finds out his face is plastered all over the newspapers as a wanted murderer. Crikey. So he gets back to the circus, confronts the brains, gives them a kicking, which is amazing, when one of them brandishes a funnel-like weapon at him, but then they teleport away by use of black jewels at the waists, but they leave the gun behind. Although, unfortunately, he wasn't able to prevent the decapitation of yet another scientist in Cambridge, a geezer with a new theory on the nature of the space-time continuum. So once again, this circus thing, the brains can teleport. Why a circus? They could go anywhere they want. Why not just set up in a bread truck or a Morris Minor? What a bonkers palaver all this is. But you know what? It's compulsive reading, Malcolm, and I couldn't stop turning the pages to see what was coming next.
Why didn't they just go to Cambridge in the first place?
I don't know.
One of the biggest concentrations of scientists in the country. Just murder them all indiscriminately. Yeah. Let's burn King's College to the ground.
I mean, at this point they're being quite selective, aren't they? Later on, they do start murdering entire colleges, entire research sites, and just murdering everybody there. Yeah.
But I mean, there is these. It's the little. What I also like is the little historical bits in this. As a historian, it kind of fascinates me. You're talking about the Khan and his ex-Hitler scientists. You know, it's like, oh yeah, because they were everywhere at this point. You had the, in the Soviet Union, the United States, Argentina, their like military plane industry was basically Kurt Tank, the former German aircraft designer from World War II. You even get to the stage when Mobutu takes over in Zaire, or what is Democratic Republic of Congo, and Mobutu decides to have a Zairean space program and hires these former like Nazi rocket scientists for it. And there's this brilliant footage of a test that they do on this like plateau out in the jungle, and Mobutu's there because the scientists have gone, this is going to be a successful rocket test, and it's genius because Mobutu with his like little leopard print hat on and his cane and everything is standing there. They go, boom, rocket goes off, goes, and then just and plummets into the jungle below and explodes, and you just see all these scientists as if they're on like ball bearings swivel round to look at the most murderous dictator in Africa and go, oh my god, what have we done? So it's all these little like nuggets that are scattered in a book like this.
Yeah, and again, this book is written at a time where the Soviets have got shitloads of Germans in gulags, and they're grilling them all and interrogating them all and getting all the information they can possibly get about their technologies, about how it all happened in the first place. I remember there was it was released about 15, 20 years ago. I think they called it the Hitler book, which was purportedly constructed from all of the intelligence they got on Hitler from all of the German general staff and politicians who they kept in gulag and tortured and basically grilled for information for decades. I don't know whether that was ever discredited as being something
not my area of specialism, so I can't actually offer a comment on that.
Whether there's any validity to any of it, who knows? But anyway, so this is all taking place around about the same time. But again, it all feeds into that idea that this would have made a great film. When I was looking into Sydney earlier on, there has been a film of a Sydney bound story, incredibly. There was a sci-fi film in 2013 called The Last Days on Mars, starring Liev Schreiber, which turned out to be something like a sci-fi zombie film set on Mars, but based on a Bounds short story from 1975, called The Animators. There you go.
You learn something every day.
Unfortunately, Bounds had been dead for 7 years by then, so he didn't make any cash out of it, which is a shame. He didn't get a payday, and I'm not sure he had an estate to benefit from it, because apparently he was unmarried.
Yeah.
Lived with his mother, and she died, and he lived for another 40 years in that house alone, just writing. So, yeah, there you go. But anyway, where are we? Christian's still on the run, but he got the energy weapon to Fox, and Fox got it to military intelligence, so the Fox and the old man are mulling all this over when they get some surprising news. Well, it turns out the Khan is dead.
Oh, no.
Oh, good Lord. So we've built up the Khan just to find out he's dead anyway. Fox resumed his seat and lit a fresh cigarette. The door opened and a man hurried in with a single sheet of typed paper. The old man read it through and passed it to Fox. "What do you make of that, Doctor?" he asked. Fox scanned the report from Asia. The Khan and 5 Europeans have been found decapitated in the Khan's palace. It's almost certain that 3 entertainers, locally known as the Brains, were responsible. The Brains are dwarfs with unusually large heads, hairless and convoluted. Their dressing grey and wear belts containing black crystals. An extensive search has been made, but the Brains have vanished completely. The same 3, Fox muttered. Not likely in the circumstances. Maybe there are more of them hidden away somewhere. I have a feeling the invasion is just getting underway, and that we'll be getting similar reports from other countries before long. The old man looked grim. "If you're right," he said, "the position is serious. I can't pretend I'm sorry to hear of the Khan's death. At least that removes the threat of World War III. But what are we left with? Invasion by things from other the world who could disappear at will and have weapons deadlier than our own? Do you have any ideas on the way they managed to vanish?" Dr. Fox shook his head. "Not now. I'd thought of teleportation. That is, the moving of matter across distances by the power of thought alone. There have been instances of people vanishing in full sight, but nothing was ever proved. However, the fact that they need the crystals negates that idea. We must seek a material explanation." The old man frowned. "If only we knew where to start looking." "They'll have a spaceship hidden somewhere," Fox said confidently. "Find that and you've found the Brains. I suggest that you check on all unidentified objects seen in the sky." "I'll do that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must see the Prime Minister immediately. The hunt for the Brains must be put on a national basis. It's essential that we get hold of one of them," Fox said quickly. "And Christian? You'll clear him now?" "Yes, I'll have a word with the Home Secretary later. I should like to meet the Captain personally." Dr. Fox made his way along a windowless corridor and reached the outside world again. London's traffic swelled about him and the newsboys called, "Another decapitation! The maniac strikes again! Special!" Fox fumbled in his pocket for coins and bought a paper. The report, so far unconfirmed, told of an Italian scientist who'd been found dead in his laboratory. Reading it, Fox had a foreboding that the real trouble was only just starting. First Britain, then Asia, now Italy. Where next, he wondered. Well, where indeed. Tells you on the very next page. New York. New York. An inventor and his financier get the ray gun treatment. And then all over the world, including a town in Canada where an armed witness managed to shoot one of the brains, but the entire town ends up being demolished by an angry army of heavily armed brains, and everybody gets murdered. So Fox and Christian have a few ales and smokes and develop a plan to catch a brain. And the best thing about this plan is that it involves sitting in a comfy chair, holding a cord that will release a net to catch a brain. It's as Scooby-Doo as fuck, and it's brilliant. And even better, it works like a charm.
Low-tech solutions to high-tech problems. I mean, that's what this is all about.
It works like an absolute charm, first time.
Yep.
And there's just this incredible scene with the most amazing visual. So Christian has captured this brainiac thing. I think it's Waldo. And he takes him to a disused brewery cellar and slaps him around. So you've got this visual of this big Nordic-looking sailor guy slapping in and threatening a 3-foot-tall dwarf with a huge bonce and threatening him with lit cigarettes. It's incredible, it's bizarre, but mostly incredible. It's such a wild image that it conjures up. But of course, it all goes Pete Tong, because apparently the secret brewery cellar wasn't secret enough, and Christian gets mobbed by a load of brains. But once again, we get these wild visuals of Christian throwing dwarfs around and kicking them and having this ridiculous fight with multiple dwarfs. And I'd love to see 1963 Patrick Allen doing this scene. It would be absolutely incredible. Incredible.
Narration in Patrick Allen voice. Has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, they overpower him and they spirit him away. Oh, but where to? We'll find out shortly. They spirit him away. And then we find out about Napoleon Wells, the black scientist. Pity poor Napoleon Wells, because he's a black scientist who gets a really positive representation in a 1956 British science fiction book, then gets decapitated by a dwarf. And also is thinking, I've finished my work now. Now I can ask my bird for her hand in marriage, and I am sure her mother will say yes. I better pop across the road to the phone box, and he doesn't make it because he gets decapitated.
Poor Napoleon.
Meanwhile, Joe, Fox, and the old man convince Madame Rosita to try and figure out where Christian is by using her gnarly powers. And Christian finds himself the captive of the brains and their 9-foot-tall hot babes.
And this is where it gets even more bizarre.
This is the most incredible switch where we learn this is very much a book of two halves, because the next chunk of the book is a bonkers experience for Christian. The majority of the rest of the book takes place away from 1966. He's fairly well looked after for a while. He's fed, he's watered, he's allowed to wander about. Witness the dwarf brains going at it with their 9-foot-tall women because they're not particularly concerned about privacy. It doesn't actually say that he sees them burning, but it does say that he witnesses the brains with their 9-foot-tall.
There's a strong
mates,
implication.
and they don't have any level of privacy.
Yeah.
So yeah, he also learns that whilst young males get brain training with machines, young women here, I say young women, they're all about 5 foot, 6 foot. The young women practice makeup and chiffon drapes and shit. That's what the women do. The men go on brain learning machines. The women practice cosmetics and nice clothes.
Well, 2 out of 3 in terms of positive representation, you know.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Although, to be fair, these are degenerate underground dwellers of the future.
True.
So these women have degenerated into this, as far as Christian is concerned. Fortunately for him, he protects a ragged-looking woman called Alma, who he sort of makes friends with. She's getting beaten up by a gang of adolescent girls. They're all 5 foot plus tall, and they're brandishing weird weapons and metal whips and things, but they're chasing this Alma around. So this comes in handy when he's eventually the prey on a big hunt, because it all turns dangerous game now. It all turns most dangerous game, where they decide to hunt him. The dwarves hunt him, the 9-foot-tall women hunt him. They hunt him through a hydroponic jungle.
I love the hydroponic jungle sequence.
Yeah, it's fantastic. She saves his life. He almost gets done in by a decapitator ray, but she intervenes, throws him over her shoulder and takes him to safety. Sadly, it doesn't last. But we do get our exposition about the crazy twist of what is going on.
Oh, yeah.
So they're not aliens.
No.
It's not an alien planet. It is 100,000 years in the future. And we're looking at a strange mashup of The Time Machine and William Hope Hodgson's The Nightland.
Yes.
Is what we're getting for the next few pages now.
I feel a bit of Troy McClure coming on.
Ah.
Oh my God, I was wrong. It was Earth all along. It's like, you can see just Christian going, they finally made a monkey out of me.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. So the brains are like Morlocks. They're the ultimate future of this degenerated mankind. The women, beautiful, blonde, but aggressive, are like the anti-Eloy. They all live underground, but Alma helps him get to the surface, sadly losing her life in the process, where he finds himself under a black sky, upon a wild landscape of ruins, a huge edifice of a wall, and Alma told him that the surface world is inhabited by strange creatures, mutated insects, and watchers. And the brains fear the watchers. It is such a bonkers switch of tone.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely here for it. It's fantastic. Now, it's a bit like if the Nightland... Once it gets to the surface, it's a bit like if The Nightland was written by Edgar Rice Burroughs and condensed by 95%.
Yes.
But it's definitely there, this idea of the Watchers. And so Bounds, by his own admission, was a huge reader of Wells as a young man.
Yeah.
He had to have read The Nightland at some point.
Yeah, bet he did.
Had to have read The Nightland. We get some Waldo Brain point of view as well, and learn their entire deal is they want to avoid this future from ever occurring, and they're going back to 1966 to destroy all of the 20th century's efforts to become an advanced spacefaring race, because that's the society that led to this. And whilst Christian is on the surface, they launch one big concerted effort to complete their plan. So back in 1966, Fox has come to this conclusion independently of Christian, probably thanks to a lot of strong bitter. The PM's had his nervous breakdown. The deputy PM feels powerless to stop it, so he just goes to see a show, which I did laugh at. And everyone's powerless to stop wholesale slaughter at rocket bases around the world. But back in the future, Christian meets the Watchers. Now, in the Nightland, Watchers were like mysterious lights at the top of towers, and you never really found out what they were, and they were sinister and menacing. In this, they're called Paul and Barbara.
Yeah.
Not very Hope Hodgson at all, but they do seem very nice. And they explain their deal to Christian. And I should point out to everybody, we have skipped over about a third of the book in 5 minutes there. But
there's a lot of wandering about in hydroponic jungles.
That's why it all gets very William Hope Hodgson.
Yeah, and then you get the giant wall.
So Paul and Barbara say, we built our spaceships and reached the planets only to die. The environment of both Venus and Mars was totally hostile. We had to reach the stars. Barbara fell silent. The walls were silver and turquoise, amoebic shapes fusing into russet whirls and emerald raindrops. Try to imagine Earth as it was then, ruined, desolate, and radioactive. A few thousand people, and the land overrun by giant insects. The brains had already gone underground and set up their colony and were, even then, degenerating. You, Captain, will understand their origin, for it dates from your own time. An attitude of mind which decreed that it was undignified for men to work with their hands, that women must, above all, be ornamental. You have seen the result of that misguided idea. Intelligence by itself is worthless. There must be wisdom to control it. That's an interesting point, that, actually, because we laugh about the portrayal of the 9-foot-tall women. But when you look at, like, the internet culture of incels and the tradwife, the 9-foot-tall women are the brain's tradwives.
Yeah.
Aren't they?
Yeah. And it's interesting, I had actually forgotten about that particular part of dialogue from Paul and Barbara about the nature of the society and how it was something to be discouraged. I had completely forgotten about that bit of it, despite rereading it.
Yeah, so basically this future is all the men are 3-foot-tall Elon Musks and all the women are 9-foot-tall Sydney Sweeneys. Oh, there you go. That's progress, isn't it? She continues, eventually we achieve the ion rocket drive. Ions are electrically charged particles which, when repulsed by a powerful electric field, attain tremendous velocities. By harnessing uranium and disintegration, we built high-tension fields. Hydrogen ions were then shot from our rocket motors, and we had starflight. Since that time, we have crossed the Great Gulf between the stars and found many planets similar to Earth. All these we have colonised. The seed of man spreads throughout the universe. It was the impetus of starflight that gave us a new wisdom. Over the centuries, we have achieved a balance of physique and intelligence without losing our basic humanity, and still we have not reached the limit of development. She paused, and the pulsing walls threw off delicate tints which were caught up and reflected in her hair. To return to the brains, we wanted to help them, but they were, by our standards, dangerously insane. They had all the atavistic tendencies we had put behind us, so we set up a base on the moon to watch over them. You must realise it's quite impossible for us to kill them. This base is constantly manned by 2 watchers in direct contact with Earth through our remote-controlled robots. We serve a period of duty lasting 12 months. Shocked, Christian exclaimed, "There are only the 2 of you? Surely you can call for help." Barbara smiled faintly. "You have no conception, Captain, of the immense distance which separates us from the nearest colony. No, Paul and I must solve this problem on our own." Curious.
It's the series of like tonal shifts in this book that occur, that kind of like the twist upon twist upon twist upon twist is just fascinating. And there was something I was going to say there, and I've completely forgotten what I was going to. Carry on. You say something, and I'll try and remember it.
Well, when it comes back to you, I'm going to say this was really fascinating to me because this is basically the same kind of deal as the Tom Cruise and Andrea Risborough characters in a film called Oblivion. The Tesseract in Oblivion must have read this book by Sidney J. Bounds, right? because in Oblivion, humanity has left Earth, and 2 people are high up in the sky monitoring the Earth and the survivors of an alien invading race that live underground, and they monitor the world with their robot assistants.
Yeah.
It's such a strange thing that it is so similar. I'm not suggesting for a second that the people who wrote Oblivion have read The Robot Brains by Sidney J. Bounds, but these themes that you get in science fiction, they come around, don't they?
Yeah.
They come around. And a film from like the mid to late 2000s has got concepts that are in a sci-fi book from the 1950s. Magic, of course, we did Immortality Incorporated not so long ago. That was written in the 50s, and Jesus Christ, that contains the seeds for almost all of modern science fiction, one way or the other.
Yeah, Robert Sheckley, yes.
Yeah.
I've got that. That was another one of my dad's books that I kind of...
Amazing book. I'd read loads of Sheckley, but I'd not read Immortality Incorporated for about 30 plus years, I don't think. So doing that on the podcast was really fascinating. But yeah, so humanity left Earth, the brains and their mates were left underground to their own devices. And much like in Oblivion, Paul and Barbara send the robots in to sort things out. The robots go down the elevator. Hilariously, they go down there too to look at the time machine, which Paul needs to decipher. So Barbara says, "I'll sort some food out," which means ordering the 9-foot women to bring them food. But she blasts them for being shit, unimaginative cooks. So they're not even any good as trad wives. They might be hot and 9 foot tall, but they can't cook. But even better, Paul and Christian go to 1966, talk to military intelligence, and drop in on Dr. Fox. And I said I wasn't going to read anymore, but I've got to read this.
Oh, yeah.
I have to read this bit. Because it turns out Dr. Fox has been busy while Christian's been in the future. Dr. Fox's house in Hampstead Village was a relic of a more genteel age. It had large bay windows and stone steps leading up to an ornate portico. Christian and Paul, now transformed by the barber and tailor, arrived by taxi, and Christian noted at once the new paint and grey curtains. He wondered what had happened to his friend, for Fox was not a man to bother with such details. The door was flung open, and Dr. Fox bounded out and gripped his hand. He was even more excited than usual. "Chris, it's good to see you again. Come in, come in." He darted back along the passage, his chubby face beaming. At the door of the living room, he checked his flight. "Surprise!" he shouted. Christian saw a small figure with dark hair. "Why, Joe," he exclaimed. "Mrs. Fox," the doctor declared proudly. "We've been married a whole week." Christian laughed. "Well, congratulations." Joe blushed. "Welcome back, sailor man," she said, and suddenly burst into tears. Fox looked confused. Christian said hurriedly, "This is Paul. Paul, these are 2 good friends of mine." "What gives here? What gives there? What's that about? Why does Joe burst into tears?" Number 1, Fox has snatched himself a hot dwarf babe and married her. I love you, Sidney J. Bounds. I just can't get enough of Sidney J. Bounds.
Yeah.
But the last bit, right? Is Jo bursting into tears because she now realises Christian isn't dead and she's ended up with second best?
Or maybe she's just glad that he's still alive.
Maybe she's just relieved.
Maybe
that he's
her and
still
Dr.
alive.
Fox, they're genuinely in love. They've
Yeah.
found kindred spirits and they're going to spend the rest of their lives together in Hampstead. in Hampstead,
Hampstead,
or the surrounding area. I like that. You put a positive spin on it.
Yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Fox aside, the brains melt the United Nations building, killing everybody inside, and Paul comes up with a plan to force them to return to the future. And it's the Mars Attacks solution.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying the people who wrote Mars Attacks have read The Robot Brains by Sidney J. Bounds, but it's the sound wave that only they can hear that drives them mad with pain. Mm-hmm. And some of them turn incredibly violent, some of them run out and get shot to bits by soldiers. It's only partially successful, though, because a big cohort under Waldo come up with one desperate last plan. So we get treated to an absolutely bonkers scene with dwarf brains attacking the first starship to leave Earth whilst a herd of mutant insects descends upon them all in the middle of a radiation storm. It's pretty fucking weird and pretty awesome and completely nuts. But, and I said I wouldn't read anymore, but I have to read this bit because I laughed out loud.
There's so much to laugh out loud at in this book.
I lolled at this. Brains and starmen and insects locked in deadly combat while, over it all, the great cylinder of the ship towered like some brooding god. Christian blasted his way towards Waldo, who raged like a madman under the silent torture of high-frequency waves. Then Paul shouted a warning. "A radioactive cloud is approaching." Christian glanced up. The sky was growing dark under a sullen mass of dust, pierced here and there by a terrible greenish glare. A weird gloom settled over the valley. Immediately, the starmen broke off the encounter and their leader snapped, "Into the ship! Hurry!" There was a rush for the gaping circular port. The strangely glowing darkness hung like a pall, and Waldo screamed to the brains to destroy the starship, while the insects attacked them. Christian saw the port begin to close. He came upon Waldo quite suddenly. The brain swung his decapitator, intent on revenging himself upon the man who had continually thwarted his plans. The beam narrowly missed the captain, who felt the intense heat of the discharge. He squeezed the trigger of his automatic and Waldo staggered as the heavy slugs hit him. "For you, Alma," Christian whispered, and emptied his magazine into the brain's enormous head. Absolutely incredible.
Scatter. Yeah, it just...
For you, Alma.
So
and emptied his magazine into the brain's enormous head.
I was wondering,
Incredible.
what is your visual image of the brains? What do they actually look like?
Do you remember the original pilot of Star Trek with Pike, played by Jeffrey What's-His-Face?
Yes.
And the aliens have got the big brains with with the air bladder veins pulsing.
Yeah.
I kind of view them like that, but with a little bit of little skinny dwarf body and tinfoil suit running around. So
I was what immediately kind of thinking about it again in preparation for this is the Mekon.
Yeah.
From Dan Dare, because I was thinking, that's what Bounds, because the Mekon 1950 first appears, I think.
Do you know, it didn't even occur to me, the Mekon. But
the Mekon
absolutely.
First appears, and the way they're described, I'm like, that's the Mekon.
Yeah.
And he's like, because instantly, the people who are reading this book will read Eagle.
Oh, yeah.
They'll know about Dan Dare and everything. So it's that interesting way of kind of like, without having to give too much detail, they instantly know what they look like because it's the Mekon.
Yeah.
It's essentially it's multiple Mekons. It's not just one Mekon, and all that kind of thing. So it's interesting thinking about
that makes sense because
the visual imagery of all of this. Yeah,
someone reading this in 1956 is going to have no handle on any of the visual references that we probably think of, except the Mekon. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think that's where I mean, their description is so close to the original Mekon that, I mean, Bounds as a writer and a prolific writer of this kind of genre fiction, he will have known of the existence of this stuff. I have absolutely no doubt about it. So what did you make? I can't believe I'm asking. Why am I asking you the questions? So what did you make of this book overall? What was your kind of your take on it as one that you'd never encountered before?
It was a ride. It certainly was a ride.
Yeah.
And when you recommended it, I had no idea what to expect. I thought, right, is this something that is just so hilariously inept that I will just laugh all the way through it? And it isn't that. It isn't that at all. I think I couldn't put it down. I read it pretty much in one sitting.
Yeah.
It's close to being a one-shit book. You could probably take this to the toilet and read it in one go. You might have marks on your buttocks by the end of it, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
could probably do this in one visit to the throne if you were really concentrating on it. But it has got so many wild ideas in it that I can imagine a lot of people would read it and go, "What the fuck is this? What am I even reading?" But I'm reading it like a lost John Pertwee Doctor Who story,
Yeah.
and loving every minute of it.
I think
The
that's a
fact
really
that we
good
get the
comparison.
happy ending because humanity did set off to the stars, the rest of the brains did return to the future, the Watchers destroyed the time machine, but their last gift is a gift to Mr. and Mrs. Fox, baby clothes from 100,000 years in the future. So they won't share any of their technology. Paul goes to great pains to not share technology because he knows that governments will try and get it from him and misuse it. But they will have one last gift, and it's baby clothes. And it is such a not naive, but it is such a plainly positive, well-intentioned, optimistic message. And it just all adds to the charm. I think I said earlier that this book's got a lot of charm.
Yeah.
And that holds right to the very end.
And it brings it back to after all this wildness and all these crazy twists of where is this going, it brings it back to a very kind of almost mundane sounds critical, but I'm not meaning it as a critical connotation, but it brings it back to this mundane human level as well. And I mean, that was probably intentional on the part of Bounds. He strikes me as a clever man. Not devoid of intelligence, and it just brings it back to this kind of like final, human level, which is quite nice. And but I mean, the trouble is, by the end of this book, when I first read it as a kid, I knew what ions were. I still didn't know what a cheroot was.
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh yes, it's 1956. Everyone will know what a cheroot is. I don't. I'm a child in Falkirk in Scotland in the early 1980s.
Yeah. No, you know what? I genuinely adore this book. It's so out there in so many ways, but in so many other ways, it's really quite pure. And there's something about Bounds. The fact that he's making no bones about the fact that he's got characters of diversity in a book written in 1956. And there is no judgment on any of it. One of the secondary heroes marries a beautiful dwarf woman from the circus. Yeah. I would read more Sidney J. Bounds, frankly.
Yes.
And while I was looking him up, there were a couple of references to other sci-fi books. But my final point on this is going to be, it's called The Robot Brains.
Yes.
There aren't any robot brains in it.
No, there are none.
So he's definitely just a jobbing writer where he's like, what should we call it? Let's call it Robot Brains. Even though it's entirely inappropriate because, it sounds cool.
A sub-editor somewhere has just gone, my science fiction novel, let's call it The Robot Brains. Haven't read it, don't know what it's about, all that kind of thing. So it's,
very probably. Well, you know what? Thank you for recommending it.
No problem
I
at all.
thoroughly enjoyed it.
Delighted to share part of my my childhood and a book I probably should not have read, age 9 or 10, with all its bizarreness and 9-foot-tall women.
Yeah. You know what? It's been a real pleasure having you on. We've talked about it for quite a long time. And I think at some point we should do my experiences in the Third World War Part 2. Maybe subtitled My Experiences of Worrying About the Third World War.
Well, I've been rereading Hackett's book a lot recently in preparation for like my own kind of writing and everything, and reading a lot around Hackett and everything. Unfortunately, I've never been to the Basil Liddell Hart archive down in London that holds all the materials related to this, about its genesis and creation. I would love to go down and read more about the different inputs into it and all of these kind of things. But I think it's a book that's worthy of more exploration. It's really
I think you're absolutely right. And I haven't even looked at it for over 30 years. Am I right in understanding that the second one he did was written a few years later to address new developments?
Yes.
So it supersedes a lot of what's in the first one. Right.
So he takes account. So the first one comes out in 78, but the second one comes out in 83, I think.
Right.
And he takes account of like the rise of solidarity in Poland.
It's
one of the big things. So they take account of that. He was the kind of framing author of it. There's all these people that that input into it. But yeah, it's a fascinating piece of work, but perhaps not as much of a page-turner as Sidney G. Bound's masterwork.
Certainly not. Although I will say, when I did read, I think it was the first Hackett book, I did read it cover to cover in my bedroom, with my notes kicking around and my typewriter where I used to type up my character sheets and all that business. So.
See, I only read it after reading Tom Clancy's Vedstorm Rising.
I've never read that.
So it's... I read it again recently, and gosh, wow, it's aged. And not just in terms of the Cold War element of it. Wow, there's some stuff in there that's... of its time. But again, it's something I've kind of reread because of the I'm exploring the kind of the nature of World War III and in fiction and all that kind of thing.
I had a mate who was massively into Tom Clancy. Was the one called Executive Decision?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I think I got to Executive Decision, and I don't think I read any more after that.
I think for like men of our age, I think all of us had a mate who was massively into Tom Clancy.
I think you're right.
Yeah, every single one of us.
Yeah. Well, you know what? In the spring, I'm going to read that first John Hackett book, maybe the second one as well, and I'm going to read Team Yankee. And maybe in the spring we'll reconvene.
Good
and
idea.
We'll talk a little bit more about those things.
I would love to do that. That would be great.
Fantastic. Well, in the meantime, thanks once again for coming along, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great fun.
Many thanks to Malcom for joining me in Derry Toms and for suggesting the robot brains. I will definitely seek out more Sidney J. Bound's books in the future. And it occurred to me when editing this that I suggested the mighty brains from the future were a bit like Elon Musk. But on reflection, I don't think that's entirely appropriate because, degenerate weirdo that he is, I don't think he's actually that bright. Similarly, Sydney Sweeney might actually be a really, really good cook. But anyway, you can pre-order Cold City and Hot War now. Print editions are just around the corner at the time this podcast goes out. A couple of episodes ago, Tanya mentioned the new edition of Air State, and Malcolm worked on that too. All are available from Handiwork Games, and I'll pop links in the show notes as well as to Malcolm's paper on Twilight 2000. In other gaming-related news, the venue for Rolling in the Ruins, our Mokokian RPG get-together in June, is now booked. I'm absolutely delighted that people have an appetite for this, so much so that we're going with 2 dates, June 6th and June 20th, here in Bradford. Magic. I'll be looking for GM submissions in March so I can get the games locked in on Warhorn, so watch this space. If none of that makes any sense to you though, worry not. We'll be back soon with part 2 of The Warlord of the Air, but in the meantime, thanks as ever to our glorious patrons. First, those without tier: Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Wheatabix. And to our Chaos Engineers, Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Osseous Nusquam, Roger McCarthy, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins and Steve Braun. And of course thanks to our crafty jugaderos, Ed von Stort, thanks for the upgrade Ed, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Kathy Rhubarb, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, James Connell, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Lorne Hugo, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Hewlett, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Ofer Ziv, Sean Twist, Toby White, Taylor Lavery, and, new to the Gunship Don Blass, welcome to Ritz B. Skits. Ritz dropped us a line via the Patreon chat and said, I was having a full re-listen to the 3 episodes and decided to chuck in my euros and contribute to this most excellent podcast. I started reading Mike's work in the 70s with the Hawkmoon books, shoplifted from the carousel in my local newsagent in St Helens. Pretty much read them all, and to be honest, the only one I don't get on with is Mother London, which I've attempted to finish on numerous occasions without success. Anyhow, I'm now getting my ear rolls around the Weetabix files, so nice one and keep up the good work. I also appreciate the absurd, far-fetched fiction of Robert Rankin, like a narrative version of Gong's Flying Teapot album trilogy. Brilliantly silly. Well, thank you Sir Ritz for coming aboard and supporting us. It's truly appreciated, as is the fact that you're the correct type of red and white. And eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Jem Gilbert, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labateau, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but of course never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough from me. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle at Breakfast Ruins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are, whatever's going on in your corner of the world, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.